Good morning. I want you to imagine for a minute two men, John and Bob. Both are 45, both married, both have 2 kids living at home. Both attend church, send their kids to public schools, and root for the Atlanta Falcons. Despite their many similarities, John and Bob are different in one very important way. John earns $200,000 a year, and Bob earns $30,000 a year. This difference in their income is likely to have important implications for many aspects of their lives. As a high earner, John probably sleeps better at night. He's less likely to have high blood pressure or to suffer from clinical depression. Quite simply, John is likely to have a longer and healthier life. It's no secret that it's nice to have money. Money allows us to buy a comfortable home in a safe neighborhood, to expose our kids to things like piano lessons, summer camps, and trips to Dollywood. But what if, despite all the obvious advantages of having more money, money actually had negative implications for our social lives? What if having higher incomes could actually isolate us from other people? There are at least 2 reasons to expect that money might make us more solitary and less social. The first is that when we don't have money, the world feels more uncertain, more unpredictable. And one way that we manage this stress is through social support. Imagine for a moment that you hold a low-wage job. Say you are a cashier at a school cafeteria, and you earn $10 an hour or $400 a week. Now, after you've covered your rent, paid your taxes, utilities, food, car payments, everything else, there's almost nothing left. Now, consider all the threats that come with this way of life. What if the timing belt on your car breaks? How will you afford to fix it? How will you get to work if you can't? What if your hours are reduced, and now instead of bringing home $400 a week, you bring home $350 or $300? How are you going to pay your rent? Where will you live if you can't? This type of uncertainty is stressful. And one of the ways that we manage the stress associated with this is through social support. When we feel scared, threatened, or uncertain, we come together. When there's a death, we mourn with others. When there's a national tragedy, we gather with others. Other people provide comfort. They help ease our stress. They help us make sense of what has happened. So for higher earners, those people who are lucky enough to inhabit worlds that have fewer of these uncertainties and threats, this driver of social connection may be diminished. There's another central reason we affiliate, and one we are often more hesitant to acknowledge. Other people help us solve problems. They help us manage threats. And we, in turn, give this aid to others. So imagine again that you work at that school cafeteria, and now you've just given birth to a baby girl. Now, there wasn't any money before at the end of the month. So how are you going to give this child what she needs to survive, to hopefully thrive? Chances are you will lean on other people. Your mother may agree to watch the child while you work in the mornings. You may trade childcare with another coworker in a similar position. You may borrow a crib from your aunt, hand-me-down clothes from your sister's older children, toys from a neighbor. This is instrumental support, the help we give and receive from other people. And if you don't have money, this kind of support is crucial. Money, however, reduces our need for instrumental support. Instead of leaning on our social networks to help raise this child, we can pay for childcare. We can buy a crib. We can buy toys. We can buy clothes. Money reduces our needs for all kinds of instrumental support. Instead of asking a neighbor to watch over our house while we're out of town, we can install an alarm system. Instead of asking our parents for help with the down payment for our first home, we can cover it ourselves. Money makes us less reliant on other people. And as a result, it may make us less focused on nurturing and fostering these relationships. So for these reasons, as a social scientist, I wondered, would people in higher earning households spend less time socializing with other people? Would they spend more time alone? I tested this possibility along with my co-author, Kathleen Voss, from the University of Minnesota, and we published our findings in a social science journal earlier this year. We analyzed data from 2 large surveys of American adults. In the first study, we analyzed data from the General Social Survey. And here, nearly 30,000 Americans were asked to document how often they spend an evening socializing with family, with neighbors, and with friends. And we wanted to know, would people in higher earning households spend less time socializing with other people? Now, of course, there are likely to be other factors associated with time spent socializing. Things like how much you work, how large your family is, your age, your gender, and many others. So we accounted for these factors so that we could look at the unique effect of income. And here's what we found. Income was strongly predictive of the number of evenings spent socializing. People in higher earning households spent significantly fewer evenings in total socializing with other people. Now you may wonder, as we did, is this the only or even the best way of measuring social time? So next we looked at data from the American Time Use Survey. And in this survey, over 88,000 Americans were asked to document how they spent each minute of the previous day. And again, we wanted to know, would higher earners spend fewer minutes of the day with other people? Would they spend more minutes alone? And again, we adjusted for many other factors that are likely to be related to time spent with others. How much you work, how large your family is. And again, we found that income seemed to dampen our interest in spending time with others. People in higher earning households spent significantly fewer minutes of the day socializing with other people. They spent significantly more minutes of the day by themselves. Now, so far, I've painted a pretty bleak picture of how income affects our social lives. That with more money, we seem to become more solitary and less relational. But as we progressed in this research, we began to wonder, does income reduce our interest in all types of social relationships or just some? Now, earlier I talked about how one function of social relationships is instrumental support, the help we give and receive from other people. Well, relationships differ in the extent to which instrumental support is expected and received. We tend to give the most instrumental support to our family members, to our relatives. We are much less likely to give instrumental support to another relational partner, our friends. Consider for a moment if you had a 2-week housing gap. You had sold one house, but it was 2 weeks before you could move into your new house. And you and your very rambunctious 2-year-old twins needed somewhere to stay. Whom would you ask to put you up? Nana or friends? Most Americans, if they had the choice, would choose Nana. We are much less likely to ask for this kind of support from friends. Friendships tend to revolve around emotional and social support. They're associated with camaraderie and fun, not substantial aid. This is a picture I took about 25 years ago of my dad and some of his close friends. Like many friends, they are similar in a lot of ways. Similar in terms of age, gender, interests. Most of them have spent their lives in schools as educators. All of them enjoy gathering around the piano, drinking cheap alcohol, and loudly singing songs like Hey Jude and Alice's Restaurant. This is typical of friendships. We tend to choose friends who are like us, who have common goals and interests and values. And these friends tend to give us considerable emotional and social support, but not considerable aid. So we wondered, would higher earners spend more of their limited social time with friends, given that they don't need substantial instrumental aid, that they can solve many of their challenges with their own resources? Would they focus on friends, that relationship type that is rooted in social and emotional support, not substantial aid? So going back to the first study, where Americans were asked how often they spend a social evening with family, with neighbors, and with friends. Whereas before we looked at the total amount of time spent socializing, next we looked at socializing patterns by the type of relationship. And here's what we found. As you probably would expect by now, high earners spent fewer evenings with their family members, with their relatives. But we found the opposite pattern for friends. Relative to low earners, high earners spent more evenings socializing with friends. And the same pattern emerged in the second study, where we looked at the number of minutes Americans spent with others during the day. And again, we found high earners spend more time with friends and less time with family compared to lower earners. So this suggests that money doesn't completely dampen our interest in affiliating. Rather, it seems to shape how we affiliate and with whom. But even though high earners spent considerably more time with friends than their lower earning counterparts, overall, they still spent considerably less time with other people. And so did other members of their household. So, what does this all mean for how we make sense of and nurture our social worlds? Well, let me tell you what I hope it means for my children. Like many parents, I hope that as adults, my children are relatively financially comfortable. That they don't spend a considerable amount of time worrying about credit card debt, foreclosure, how they might afford to fix a timing belt on their car. But I also hope that they have rich social lives, that they give and receive considerable social and instrumental support from each other, to their cousins, to their aunts and uncles, to their parents, to their friends, to their communities and neighbors. Like money, social relationships improve the quality and quantity of our lives. They make us happier and healthier. But if you think about it, a lot of what we use discretionary money for pushes us away from other people. We buy a bigger house so that each member of the family can have more individual space. We put a swing set in the backyard and then spend less time at the neighborhood park. But perhaps if we recognize this tendency, and if it bothers us, there are things we can do to counteract it. Maybe we can use some of that discretionary money to nurture our social worlds, to foster connections, to bring us closer together. That is what I hope for my children. Thank you.